Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
And we have Parshat Vay'chee. Dov, thanks for the setup. Starting on page 268. Vay'chee is the final Parsha of Breishit. It deals with Yaakov living in Mitzrayim for 17 years. We'll soon see that pasuk. And then the death, and then Yaakov giving the brachot, giving the blessings to each of his children, to the tribes. And then Yaakov's death. And then the aftermath of Yaakov's death. And finally, it concludes, the very last pasuk is the death of Yosef. Okay? The very last pasuk is Vayamet Yosef. Yosef died when he was 110 years old. Vayachantu oto, and he was embalmed by the Egyptians. Vayisem ba'aron, and he was placed in an aron, in a coffin, in Mitzrayim. Right? Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. With that, we conclude the book of Breishit. So let's see these different stages that Vay'chee goes through. Let's first zero in a little bit, and then we will fade out to Vay'chee, and then we will fade out a little bit further to see this in the context of the entire book of Breishit.
There's
right?
something very special about the very last word of this is Egypt.
We'll see. Okay, so let us begin on page 268 with the first pasuk in Ivrit. Miri b'vakasha, Vay'chee.
ויחי יעקב בארץ מצרים 17 שנה, ויהי ימי יעקב שני חייו 7 שנים ו40 ומאה שנה.
Okay. In English, please.
Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, and the days of Yaakov, the years of his life, were 147 years.
Good. Now, we had before when Yaakov appeared before Paro, and Paro says to him, "How old are you?" And that's on page 260. 264. Yes. Right? Thank you, Dov. The top of 264. Paro says to Yaakov, Kama yemei shnei chayecha. First of all, any math majors here? No? Okay. So Paro says to Yaakov, what are the years of the days of your life? Yaakov says to him, right, the days of the years of my sojourning were 130 years. Okay. So how old was Yaakov when he went down to Egypt? 130 years. How old is he when he died? 147. Math majors.
17 years.
Good. I thought you said there weren't math majors over here. Wow. Incredible. So why do I need the pasuk to tell me that Yaakov lived in Egypt for 17 years if just a few pages ago we heard Yaakov was 130 when he went to Mitzrayim, and in this pasuk we're going to hear that he died at the age of 147, right? So we've just proven that even without being a math major, one can determine that he spent 17 years in Mitzrayim.
Maybe we'll learn something else.
I think we will learn something else, though. Good. Okay? Now, also the Or HaChaim, not the Or HaChaim, excuse me. The Balaturim points out that Vay'chee, and he lived, has a numerical value of 34. Vav is 6, Yud and Yud is 10, and 10 is 20, and 6 is 26, and Chet is 8. That gives us a tally of 34. Now, something else that's interesting that the Or HaChaim notes is, remember when we listed the years of the life of Sarah? How did we list it? 100 years and 20 years and 7 years, right? And right, we've always listed the 100 and the 20s and the 7s, whereas over here, it's the other way around. It's the way that we're more familiar with, right? 7 and 40 and 100. So why is the Pasuk telling us that which we can very easily compute and know on our own in terms of the 17 years? Why are his years written in the opposite order than everyone else's? And what's the significance of Vay'chee being 34? Now, Vay'chee means, and he lived. And he lived in the land of Mitzrayim, 17 Shana. Remember, back before, Yaakov, when he finally hears that Yosef, his son, is alive, and that God has appointed him as the ruler of Mitzrayim, the Pasuk says, Vay'chee ruach Yaakov. The spirit of Yaakov, Vay'chee, it came to life. Vay'chee ruach Yaakov avihem. The spirit of Yaakov came to life. Right? When was Yaakov alive? When do we feel alive? I'm not talking about a pulse. Okay? When do we feel alive?
When we're accomplishing.
Good. Right? When we are accomplishing that which we feel we should be accomplishing, that is when we are energized. That is when we are alive. That's when we feel alive. Right? Life, you know the expression, the past, the future, and that's what we call the present because it's a gift, right? Life is an opportunity to accomplish. When we are utilizing that opportunity and we are accomplishing that which we feel we are supposed to be accomplishing with our lives, we feel alive. Yaakov heard that Yosef was alive, and I don't think I mentioned here in this class, a different way. Right? Yosef's message that he asked the brothers to send to his father. Did we discuss the wording in this class?
Yes.
We did.
One word used on Yaakov.
Good. It's good. So when he sent the message, it was, Yosef, your son is alive and God has appointed me. Right? Yaakov heard that and he wasn't all that impressed. Right? Then, when they told him all the words of his son, that Yosef, your son is alive, and God has appointed me over Mitzrayim, then Vay'chee ruach Yaakov. Then Yaakov's spirit came to life. Why was he alive? Because at that point he felt he had accomplished. What did Yaakov know that he needed to accomplish? 12 sons. That is why when Yaakov presumed that Yosef was dead, he was inconsolable. And he said, I will go down to my grave still mourning. Now, people tragically lose a child. But they continue to live. Never the same, but they continue to live. I don't think we would... my father lost my sister, his daughter, right? It was as severe a blow as could have, right? But my father, alav hashalom, passed away about 30 years after that. I wouldn't say he went down to his grave mourning his daughter. Right? He was forever changed because of that loss, But he didn't go down to his grave mourning his daughter. That's not how I would describe his life. Yaakov was inconsolable. 22 years. Inconsolable. Why? Because he didn't feel that he had accomplished what he was meant to accomplish. He viewed that as he had failed in his mission of founding this nation of Israel with the 12 tribes. We say Yaakov, we say mitato shalema. Literally, his bed was complete, meaning his progeny, his children. He had 12 tzaddikim as children. But when he thought that he had missed out when Yosef was dead, torn up, he thought that he had failed in his mission. He was inconsolable. When was he alive? Vay'chee Yaakov. Yaakov was alive. Where? Be'eretz Mitzrayim. In Eretz Mitzrayim. Why? Shiva Esrei Shana. 17 years. So it's not coming simply to tell me the amount of years. We could have done the math very easily on our own. It's coming to teach us that he was alive for those 17 years. Why was he alive for those 17 years? Because he was with Yosef. He was reunited. All of his sons, he was with all of his sons. They were all righteous. He had accomplished his mission, what he understood to be his mission in life. Vay'chee Yaakov, therefore he was alive now for Shva Esrei Shana, for those 17 years.
He gets that way not in Mitzrayim.
I'm sorry?
He gets that way not in Mitzrayim. He revives in Israel.
Yes, but when he sees Yaakov, yes, that's when his spirit came, right? And then right away he traveled to Mitzrayim. Right away he traveled to Mitzrayim. Now the Baal HaTurim points out the gematria of Vay'chee is 34. Because there were also another 17, right? 17 times 2 is 34. There were another 17 years where also he was chai, he was fully alive. What were those 17 years?
The 17 years that Joseph was with him.
Good. The 17 years that Joseph was with him until Joseph was sold. So therefore we had the 34 years of Vay'chee, of him being alive. Right? Fully alive. And those were the 17 years, the first 17 years of Yosef's life, when they were, of course, together before Yosef was sold, and the last 17 years of his life.
And how hard was it for his father to keep the secret?
Yeah. Now,
Sorry, Raymond?
yes.
So did he think he did something wrong in the sense that when they sold Joseph, so he blamed himself, like he was the one who was at
That's
fault?
interesting, Leah. I don't know if I did something wrong, if I blame myself, but if I failed, I failed. Meaning, sometimes, right, I might not have done anything directly wrong myself.
But then you
But clearly, I was remiss. I was not worthy of having fulfilled the mission. Right? You know, I don't know if he was blaming himself necessarily, but he had not actualized what he was meant to actualize with his life. That's how he felt. Right? Was he at fault? We always blame ourselves. We always find, we always look at ourselves and say, yeah, I could have done that better, I could have done this better, right? I'm not sure in this case, right?
Especially when you're thinking that, when you're in, like, the divine plan is the divine plan. So if he is thinking that the divine plan is the divine plan, then when you fail or when you succeed, it's not you, it's the divine plan.
Yes and no. The divine plan, God's plan will work out, right? The question always is, what role will I or won't I play in it, right? The divine plan is not always what happens with me, is not what happens with me necessarily. I can control to a certain degree through my free will the role that I play. The divine plan is going to happen, right? I'm not responsible for the divine plan.
So
I'm
in
responsible
that
for the role
context,
that I play.
He felt like he didn't rise to the occasion, or
That's what it would seem. Yeah. And there's a medrash by Yosef and the wife of Potiphar, right? That mentions the idea of him having 12 children, Yosef having 12 children, which would speak of this idea that if Yaakov won't accomplish it, then the baton will be handed down to the next generation, and Yosef is the one who would have the 12 children, right? So, Klal Yisroel is going to be formed, right? The question is, right, who's going to be that Av, who's going to form it, right? So Yaakov felt that he had failed, right? He had not fulfilled that mission that was his. And
So did Joseph have 12 children?
No, Joseph had
Yes,
2
no,
children.
because
Yes.
Yaakov,
Yeah, Tachad Zro'ot Ya'adav, right, when he was holding back from sinning with Potiphar, right? So there's a medrash there that he lost it, yeah. Now the Or Chaim explains that perhaps that's why the order is different over here also. 7 years and 40 years and 100 years instead of 140 and 7, right? Because when was he fully alive for at least these last 17? That was the end of his life. So we didn't want to start with the first 100 and then 40 and then 7. We started with the 7 and then the 40 and then the 100, because that's when he was more alive. Let's fade the camera back a little bit. We have this concept of Maseh Avot Siman Labanim. That which the steps that the Avot, the patriarchs and matriarchs go through, that is setting the template for that which will follow. Okay? And we have Avraham being, Avraham having the dream, having that vision during the Brit Bein HaBetarim, and hearing about our being enslaved in a land that is not ours. We go through all these different stages of Klal Yisrael, of the odyssey of the nation of Israel. We go through that through the Avot, stage by stage. Yaakov, what would the end of Yaakov's life represent? If the Avot are laying out the template for the children of Israel as we make our way through history, what would the end of Yaakov's life, what would that represent? Well, let's go back a little bit, right? We had in Parsha Vay'chee, Bikesh Yaakov leishev b'shalva. Yaakov wanted to sit comfortably, relaxed. He wanted to retire, right? Leisure world, right? That's where he wanted to move, right? And what happened? Kafatz alav, all of the problems of Yosef, right? And all that jumped upon him. Why? And Rashi brings the Medrash where, so to speak, Hashem says, is it not enough for the righteous that they have the world to come? They also want this tranquility, this serenity in this world. That's not the case. So Yaakov went through, right, a tremendous hardships through his life, right? Dealing with Esav, right? Esav, of course, is the nation of Edom, right, which is our present Galus, right? He was injured, when he wrestled with that angel of Edom. And that represents that through this galut of Edom, we will be hit hard. We will be damaged greatly. And certainly we see that we have. And we also had Yaakov as he's praying to God before his meeting with Esav. He says, Hatzileni na miyad achi miyad Esav. Save me from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esav. And I believe we explained over there, it's one and the same, his brother Esav. So save me from my brother Esav. Save me from my brother. Save me from Esav. Save me from my brother Esav. Why does it split? It's save me from the hand of my brother, the hand of Esav. And we explained based on the Beis Halevi that actually there were two dangers that Esav presents. There's the Esav and there's the brother. Both of them are dangers. Esav is the military Esav coming to do battle. That Esav is the Edom of a Nazi Germany, of crematoria, of gas chambers, of concentration camps. There's also the brother. Save me from the hand of my brother. And that is, basically explains the idea of assimilation. That has ravaged our people during this exile. So Yaakov has been through it all in his lifetime. And the exiles that we are living, those are that's based on the template of what Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, specifically Yaakov, went through. So what will the end of Yaakov's life, where he's living blissfully in Mitzrayim, what will that represent?
When we're all out of Galut.
Yeah, that's the Zman Mashiach.
But it's in Egypt.
Correct.
I would agree with you, except for the fact that it's not in Israel.
Correct. That's an interesting point you're bringing up.
Explain
right?
that one.
Right. Well, I will come back to that shortly. Okay. Well, let's touch upon that. Right. If we'll zoom ahead to next week for a moment. Right. So Shemot begins. These are the names of page 292. These are the names of the children of Israel who came down to Egypt with Yaakov, Ishivei Tova'u, right? And we list the names. 1 second, what's strange about that?
Didn't we just already do?
Right, we're already in Egypt, right? The past 3 Parshiot, at the end of Breishit, we're already in Egypt, right? So why is Shemot starting again with those who went down to Egypt? Right? The last pasuk was Yosef dying in Egypt. Yaakov had died already. Now Yosef died. Now you're talking about Yaakov coming down to Egypt? What's going on over here? So the Ramban explains that each sefer, each book of the Torah, the Torah is Chamisha Chumshei Torah. There's the Chumash. Chumash comes from the lashon of Chomesh, which is a 5th. They're the 5 books of Moshe, right? Each one has its own theme. Thank you, Dov. Right? The theme of Shemot is exile and redemption. All right, we discussed this before. So therefore, Shemot, it's not a storybook picking up, oh, Yosef died, now let's start Shemot, what happens now? No. This is the book of exile and redemption. The previous book, Breishit, was the book of creation, both the physical creation and the creation of the start, the principles that would found this nation. That began with Breishit and ended with the death of Yosef. That's that book beginning and end. Shemot is the book of exile and redemption. It begins with exile. So we have to go back, double back, to to the very start of the exile, Yaakov and everyone coming down to Egypt, and it ends with redemption. What's the redemption that it ends with? Right? And we mentioned before, not the giving of the Torah, not leaving Egypt, not the giving of the Torah, not entering Israel, but what is the redemption that it ends with? Right, on page 540, the last paragraph of the Torah. When I say Parsha, I don't mean a weekly Parsha, but a Parsha is also a paragraph in the Torah. In the Torah itself, there are paragraph breaks. The last paragraph is talking about the Mishkan having been constructed, and the cloud covered the tent of meeting, the glory of Hashem filled the tabernacle. Moshe entered the tent of meeting, for the cloud rested upon it, and the glory of Hashem filled the tabernacle. When the cloud was raised in the tabernacle, the children of Israel would embark on their journeys. If the cloud did not rise up, they would not embark. Till the day it rose up. For the cloud of Hashem would be on the tabernacle by day, and fire would be on it by night, before the eyes of all the house of Israel throughout their journeys. So this is the redemption. The book of exile and redemption began with the exile. These are the names of the children of Israel went down to Egypt with Yaakov. Each man in his household came. And it ends with the redemption. What is the redemption?
That Hashem's presence.
Hashem's presence is there with them. Where was this taking place?
Outside of Israel.
Outside of Israel. Outside of Israel.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Right? So, right? Ultimately, the redemption will take place in Israel. In our world, the redemption will be certainly in Israel. But that Yaakov's redemption, right, that the stage in his life which represents the redemption stage is outside of Israel. Now, we also had a very interesting concept. The Pasuk, it'll take a little while to find it. When the Pasuk says that Hashem went up from upon him, upon Avraham. So there Rashi brings the teaching from the Medrash or from the Zohar, right, that Avot Hein HaMerkava. The Avot, the patriarchs, they were the chariot. They were the chariot, so to speak, of Hashem. Right? Their homes. What did we find in the house of Sarah? What was there in the house of Sarah? There was the cloud that was always above it. Right? Where else was there a cloud above?
Mishkan.
That was by the Mishkan. Right? The candles were always burning. Where else did we have candles that were always burning? Right? In the Mishkan. There was bracha be'isa. There was the blessing in the dough. Right? Where else did we find this blessing in the dough? In the Mishkan, that which the Kohanim would eat. Right? Those, by the way, are the three special mitzvot of the women. Right? The cloud representing the purity, that's the family purity. The candle is hadlakat neirot, and the dough is the mitzvah of separating challah. That also is the three places where the women have a special yihi ratzon, a special supplication that is said. The special supplication is said upon going to the mikveh. It's said upon lighting candles Friday night. And it's said upon separating challah, when baking. So the house of the Avot, when Sarah was there, and it stopped when Sarah died, and that returned when Yitzchak married Rivka, they and their houses became like the Mishkan. So for them, being outside of Israel, I can wrap my head around it. The ultimate geula is going to be in Israel. But they were living embodiments of the Mishkan, of the Shechina, of this geula state. So that which Yaakov wanted to dwell, Leishev B'Shalva, it was not yet the time. But when did the time arrive? Vay'chee Yaakov. That Yaakov lived in Mitzrayim for those 17 years, that is corresponding to the Zman, the time of the Mashiach.
Rabbi,
Now-
can we say that Yosef saved the whole world?
Perhaps.
Like Mashiach Yosef?
I'm not sure, though. Now,
Also, does that mean that for the beginning of the Messianic era, people don't necessarily already have to be in Israel? They could be elsewhere?
Once the Messianic era begins, that's where we're all flocking to, right? That's where we are all flocking to. If you think the airports get crowded around the end of December time, right? Just wait.
But to usher
Just wait till then.
people
Yeah.
don't have to already be there to usher it in.
I don't think everyone needs to be there at that time. Correct. Now, if you turn to page 284, 284 is in the middle of Vay'chee. And that is the death of Yaakov. Pasuk Lamed Gimel is the pasuk of the death of Yaakov. Vayechal Yaakov. Yaakov finished. Litzavot, to give his tzava. Right, tzava is the term we use for a will. Right, to give his instructions to his sons. Vaye'esof raglav el hamita. He drew his feet to the bed. Vayigva. Vaye'asef el amav. Vayigva, it's translated, he expired and was gathered to his people. First of all, just an important point to keep in mind, right? What does it mean he was gathered to his people? He died, he was gathered to his people. What does that mean?
Who's his people?
Right? Now, we're not talking about burial, because that hasn't happened yet. That's the next thing is going to happen, right? Right? Yosef's going to speak to Paro, they're going to agree, and the next bunch of psukim will deal with the burial.
Isn't the
Okay.
same words used for Moses and
Yeah.
Aaron?
But Yasaf el Amav, that term is used before the burial. Okay? Yasaf el Amav refers to what happens when a person dies, meaning the body is no longer functioning, but the person, when we say the soul, we're not talking about this whatever thing that might be. The soul is us, who we are, with our feelings, our personalities, exactly who we are, leaves the body and is gathered to who? To our people, right? To those who have preceded us into the next world. But what word is missing over here? Doesn't say
He died.
that he died. Rashi says, Vayikva, Vaye'esaf, Umita lo nemrubo. It doesn't say that he died. V'amru Chazal, Chazal say, Yaakov Avinu lo mate. Yaakov Avinu didn't die.
Is that the same as Eliyahu?
Huh? Eliyahu went up alive to the heavens. It's a different situation. Right? Now, however we'll understand this, there are different ways of understanding it. But, right, and down here I'm sure they have a few, right? Take a look in the notes underneath here, right? First one is, just as his descendants live on, so does he. Right? Jacob lives on spiritually because his offspring maintain his heritage. Right? He founded this nation, and therefore he lives on through us. Right? That's the simple understanding. Rasisei Laila comments that Jacob has so perfected his body that there is no contradiction to his soul. Death is a wrenching, painful concept only because, and to the extent that it involves the soul's removal from material existence that has come to crave. The more materially lustful a person is, the less he can bear to part from this life to the holier one awaiting him. Conversely, the more spiritual his earthly life has become, the less he is encumbered by his body's animal demands and instincts. Jacob had so perfected himself that leaving this life meant no more to him than removing a coat means to us. His soul simply discarded its earthly raiment, his body, and continued essentially unchanged. In the deepest sense, therefore, death did not exist for him, so he did not die in the conventional sense. Now, this is what it says by Yaakov. Okay? Now, what is the stage that comes about after the time of Mashiach? There's the time of the Mashiach. The stage after the time of the Mashiach is when this world will no longer exist in the physical manner that it presently exists. During the time of Mashiach, it does exist as it presently exists in a physical sense, but it's becoming very spiritualized in terms of our understanding, in terms of the whole world's understanding, in terms of our goals. That's we had in Parshas Nitzavim, I believe, the very end of Devarim. We had over there where Ramban speaks about on the Psukim, I will remove the heart of stone, right? And Ramban speaks about there, it'll be our natural desire to do all the mitzvot, the same way that we naturally want to breathe and naturally want to eat, right? And cater to our physical body. Then it'll be our second nature to want to engage in spiritual activities in the mitzvot to feed our spiritual self. So the world will continue to be the physical world as it is now, but we will have a different view, a different perspective, and different wants that will drive us. But the stage after that is the time where this world will cease to exist in the physical state that it exists now, and it'll be a time of pure spiritual life. So the second part of this Parsha is where Yaakov is no longer physically alive, but is still completely and totally alive. Now, what we have at this point of this world's odyssey is that when a person dies, the soul goes to what's called the Olam HaNeshamot. What we call Olam Haba is actually the Olam HaNeshamot, the world of the souls, the spiritual world. And there the soul is waiting for the time where it will reunite with the body, but the body without being in this completely spiritualized sense. So the second part of this Parsha is corresponding to the post-messianic time, where Yaakov Avinu lo meit, the physical body is no longer as we know it to be, but he has not died. So these are the last stages of the template that the Avot have set out for us, with Yaakov's difficult life being the time leading up to Mashiach, and then those last 17 years, Vay'chee Yaakov, is having fulfilled his mission, that corresponds to the Zman Mashiach. And after his physical death, when we say, right, by others it said mate, by Yitzchak and Yaakov, by Avraham and Yitzchak, it mentioned the word mate, right? But by Yaakov it doesn't. That corresponds to the next stage that the world will come to. The final stage. Now, one other thing that I like to do, so let's now take our lens a little bit further out. And we saw how in Shemot, the very beginning of Shemot connects very, very directly to the end of Shemot, right? It was the book of exile and redemption. So let's look at the very beginning of Breishit, and how does this co-join with the very, very end of Breishit? Okay? Breishit began, Breishit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, the beginning of God's creation, of Shamayim and Aretz. And the last part is the death of Yaakov, and the very last pasuk is the death of Yosef. So how might those be connected? Let's put that aside for a moment. What happened right before the death of Yosef? Right? We have on page 286, 287, we have the burial of Yaakov. And then, Pasuk Tedvav, Vayiru Achei Yosef, on page 286. The brothers of Joseph saw Ki Meit Avihem, that their father had died. Vayomru, and they said, Lu Yistamenu Yosef. Perhaps Yosef is going to have animosity against us. V'hashev yashiv lanu et kol ha'ra'ah asher gamalnu oto. And he might return unto us all of the bad that we did to him. Now, what happened all of a sudden? Things seem to be okay with the brothers. So what happened? Something just struck me now. Remember, what was Esav's threat?
To kill Yaakov after Yitzhak died.
Oh, right. Esav said, right, I'll wait till my father dies, and then I'm going to give it to Yaakov. Right? So, this struck me now, if the brothers were thinking, right, Yosef was waiting until our father would die, and now we're going to get it. But actually, Rashi brings that actually something had changed. That whereas before, right, they would sit with him at his table, right? Now they were no longer invited to his table for the royal meals. They started to get nervous. Now the Sittei Chacham explains the reason why Yaakov, the reason why it changed was originally, right, when the father was alive, so then I have to see it again inside.
Together?
I'm sorry?
Everybody went together when the father was
No, the problem was that now, I'm not sure what changed. I have to see it come again inside. He points out that now to have Ruvain, for him to sit above his other brothers, right, would be a show of disrespect to them, but also he as the Melech couldn't sit beneath them. Why was it different? I have to see it again, why it was different before. But there was a change, right? So now they're getting nervous. Vayitzavu el Yosef lemor. So they commanded to Yosef that it should be said. I mean, they didn't say anything to him, but they commanded others to go to Yosef and say the following. Avicha tziva, your father commanded. We overheard your father commanding Lifnei Moto before his death, Lamor, saying, page 288, 289, Kotem li Yosef, say this to Yosef, Ana sana pesha achecha, carry please the sin of your brothers, v'chatatam, ki ra'a gemalucha, they've done bad to you, va'ata, and now sana, carry please, bear please, lepesha, the sin of Avdei, the servants of the God of your father. Right? So don't take it out on them. So it was presented to Yosef that this was his father's words. Vayef Yosef. Yosef cried, Bidabram Elav, when these words were spoken to him. Vayelchu gam echav, and then the brothers came, Vayiplu lefanav, and they threw themselves before him, and they said, Hinenu l'chal avadim, we are to you as your servants, as your slaves. But Yomer Yaleim, Yosef said to them, Al tira'u, do not be afraid. Ki hatachat Elokim ani, right? Am I in the place of God? Atem chashavtem alai ra'a, you thought badly against me. Your intent was to do me harm. Elokim chashava l'tova, but God has intended it for the good. Laman aso kayom hazeh lachayot am rav, right? And as Rashi explains, it'll be as clear as day in order to keep this tremendous nation alive. V'ata now al tira'u, anochi achakel etchem, betachem. Don't be afraid. I will support you and your families. Vayinachem otam, and he spoke to them. Vayidaber al libam, and he spoke to their hearts. What was one of the first sins that we had in Breishit, in the beginning of the Torah? What was one of the very first sins, grievous sins?
Not listening to Hashem.
Okay, so we have the Eitz Hadat, not listening to Hashem, and then what followed soon after that?
Cain killing Hevel.
Cain killing Hevel. Right? Cain and Abel. Cain killing Hevel. And when Hashem says to him, where is your brother? The famous words, what was Cain's response? Hashomer achi anochi. Am I my brother's keeper? Right? Very, very famous
Shomer is
line.
from Safeguarder. Am I my brother's
Hashomer
safeguarder?
achi anochi. Am I the one who is the guardian? Am I the keeper? My brother's keeper? Am I my brother's guardian? Right? And what do we have at the very end of the Torah over here? Right? What's the last episode that we have before the death of Yosef? His being his Shomer Achi. Right? His taking care of the brothers. Not just materialistically, but also speaking to their hearts, putting them at ease, right? You know, the Gemara discusses that a person can feed their father and deserve hell for it, and a person can make their father work, slave away at a grinding mill and receive olam haba, receive reward for it. And the Gemara says it all depends on the situation and how something is done. The Gemara tells two stories. One story is of a person who was supporting his family and living with his father and his wife and children. The father was drafted to go into the army. Okay, he's already an older man. And he knew his father would not survive this stint in the army. So he said to his father, "Father, I will go in your place, but I need you then to take over that which I do at home to support my family." So he made his father work in the mill in order for him to replace his father and go off to the army in his father's place to serve the king's army, whatever it was. And so he made his father work in a mill. By doing that, he was saving his father's life. He receives reward for it. The Gemara tells another person who was very wealthy, and he was feeding his father these fattened geese, which then, before they knew about cholesterol, was a great delicacy, right? But his attitude was, echol kelev, echol, eat dog, eat, right? He did it he was sustaining his father and feeding him great food, but in a very degrading, demeaning manner. So it's not just what we do, it's the situation and it's how we do it. Yosef was vayidaber al liban. He spoke to their hearts and he comforted them and he reassured them and he let them keep their dignity about it. So we go from Hashomer Achi Anochi, killing a brother, right, and relinquishing any responsibility that I have for others, even for my own brother, to completely assuming responsibility. But if we'll zoom out just a little bit further, the Torah began with there being this Shamayim and Aretz. There was the heavens and there was the earth. As we say, and never the twain shall meet. We had these completely different realms. What was the purpose of this creation and what was the role of the Avot that they've now passed on to the next generation? Right? Avraham refers to God first, right? Let me find this quickly. Avraham first refers to God as Elokei Hashamayim, and then he refers to him as Elokei Shamayim Va'aretz. First he refers to him as the God of the heavens, and then he refers to him as the God of heaven and earth. Meaning, Avraham says, when I started off, you were just the God of the heavens. I've made you, I've taught the world about you, I've made you the God of heaven and earth. And we had the outright nevuah, prophecy of the Avot. Do we ever find God speaking to Yosef?
Only the dreams.
We never find Vaydaber Hashem El Yosef Lamor. Right? We had Avram, God speaking to Avram, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov. We don't find Hashem speaking to Yosef, but Hashem does speak to Yosef. How does Hashem speak to Yosef? Through this ability to understand the will of God. So with Yosef, with the Avot, we have a certain degree of connection of heaven and earth, but it's still, heaven to earth. Do you read me? Do you read me? Right? Whereas by Yosef, there is this melding of the two. That he's living his life here, and he's feeling, sensing, not hearing, not directly hearing, but there is this permeation of God of heavens and earth coming together. That through his living his life as he's meant to be living his life, he senses what it is that God is telling him, what it is that he is supposed to be doing. Right? The interpretation of the dream, of his own dreams. According to Ramban, as we mentioned, that those he understood were prophecies. His understanding of the dreams of the butler and of the baker. His understanding of Paro's dreams, his understanding and accepting the hell that he went through, being thrown into a pit and being sold, then being sold by his brothers, and all that he went through in Mitzrayim, accepting that Hashem has appointed me here. Hashem has sent me here to be a michya for you, to be a source of sustenance for you, as he told them when he revealed his identity, and he reassures them again. Right? Elokim chashava l'tova. God has deemed it for good in order to sustain, keep alive a great nation. Yosef, at the end of at the end of Breishit, when we zoom completely out, we start off with Shamayim, heavens and earth, and with Yosef we see how there is this melding, this permeation of the two, even without Vayedaber Hashem, and God spoke to, even without that, there is this heaven on earth and heaven. There is living, walking this earth, but sensing what we call Hashgacha Pratit, which is this divine, personal orchestration and involvement and care. That God cares what happens to us, even on a very, very, very micro level. So perhaps, like in Shemot, where we had that beginning and the end, and the two are so closely touching, perhaps this is also the completion of this mission, this purpose. Right? We always say, why did God create the world? Now, we can't understand anything about God. We can understand that which He has shared with us, and we can work within those parameters. And our understanding is that in order for us to be able to connect to Him, He being the epitome of good, and wanting to create beings who will be able to share and bask and enjoy that good through our relationship with Him, our connection to Him, which begins in this world, during our life in this world, and ultimately will be as we reach the later stages, whether it's the interim Olam HaNeshamot that we spoke about, or the ultimate stages that Yaakov is setting the template for us over here, which is the Zman Mashiach and the ultimate top point of Bil HaMavet Lenetzach, of that point of Yaakov Avinu Lomet. But that is the ultimate purpose of Breishit, which we come to along this process, which we come to over here with the end of the Torah, the end of the Sefer of Breishit. Yeah.
Is there a connection of